Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get started. We're at the top of the hour. We may have some folks that will join here, but want to quickly and briefly just introduce myself again for those that don't know. I'm Rachel Zeman. I'm the founder and CEO of Benelinx. Be going through the presentation today, talking about the renewal process and automations. I have Ashley Montgomery and Ian Legler here as well from our team. Ian is on the onboarding side. He's a licensed Salesforce admin. Ashlyn is in charge of our service and support team. So you may or may not have interacted with those folks, and you may or may not have seen them. So it's nice to put a face with the name. I always like that. So let's go. Let's get started here. Again, I'm going to give you an overview. I mentioned this before we officially got started, but we're getting this kind of process down, this routine of training. We will automatically send out a copy of this recording after it's generated. And Jessica on our team, who's our new marketing specialist, she'll be kind of modifying it slightly. So that'll go out for everybody that's here. Any of the participants, feel free to share that with your colleagues and then upon request after that. So you don't need to email us and ask us for it because that'll be just part of the process. So this is a really important training session we want to go through for a couple reasons. One, we've made a tremendous amount of updates to the Benelinx managed package in the last year regarding the renewal process. I'm going to give you the highlights here. I'm going to give you the overview and then we'll dive in and show you what it looks like. But it's the process of renewing our policy and service records. This is really important this time of year, right? We don't want to renew our policies in January if we can help it. We want to do it while we're thinking of the client. We're well aware of the decisions that they've made. But it also is helpful for us to renew our policies at the time the client makes a decision, for us to update our workflows, but also generate those really important benefit booklets and potentially push those policies to Ease or Navigator. So we want to do it timely. But we also want to do it efficiently, right? It is a manual process, but we're going to show you how you can renew the policies and all the information that does get carried over. So we try to make it as simple as possible. But it's a really important piece of keeping your agency management system up to date. So we're going to review kind of how do we create a record, policy or service record? What are the important fields? How does it work, right? If those of you that are brand new may or may not even understand what is happening and what we automatically update for you around the policy status, contract length, and expiration date. I'm going to show you the dynamic nature of our page layouts. A couple years ago, we went through all of our existing Benelinx clients and made the pages dynamic with the Lightning components. Really important. We're using the most modern capabilities of Salesforce. And so you'll see that some of these fields on the policy records disappear and new ones appear kind of depending on certain values that we set kind of at the top of our policy records, most importantly, our in-force type. So we'll talk about that and some of the new fields that are appearing. And then also the ability for us to track the history of our policies. So based on a tremendous amount of feedback, getting some larger agencies on board, we needed to track our policies at a little bit more of a granular level. One, so that we understood and we can report on not only is this an enforced policy, but what type? Have we been moving policies, right? Are we moving carriers? When we can add additional fields to track that, now we can report on that information. Is a policy terming and why, right? But also we need to be able to track that level of detail for commissions, right? So we need to be able to start to see, gee, this is a renewed policy. This is, second year, third year for those graded commission schedules. So the more complex our agency partners get, the more we needed to add in more information for that policy tracking. Expected commissions, tracking that producer comp as well. So once we kind of review, right, what the policy looks like, what some of the fields that have been there that you may or may not be aware of, some of the new fields, dynamic nature, then we're going to talk about two different ways that we can renew our policies. First and foremost, we can use the Renew Clone Policy button. Same exact button lives on the services. So those of you that are renewing your services as well every year, some clients don't renew their services every year. They kind of let them roll. The same process will apply. We're going to focus on policies today, but you can do the exact same thing with services. And we're going to talk about the key features of that button and why do we use that button and when do we use that button, right? And why would we use it versus just go in and update the record, and or why wouldn't we create a new record? We're going to use this button in most cases unless we're selling a brand new product. And we're going to go through what these mean, right? What is the fields that are there? What are the importance of having those fields? What fields you may or may not be using, but why would we want to maybe add fields like the total premium and expected members? If we want to start tracking, what are we receiving in commissions, right? Versus what are we expecting? If we don't have that data, then we can't do that comparison, right? So some new fields for us to consider if we want to do that comparison reporting. And then making some pretty big changes to our renewing policies, right? Where we can now self-select and change the plan that we're looking up in the plan library and or the carrier. So that's the first option, right? We can renew the policies going into a record, hit the renew policy button, and it'll take us through that process. I'll show you in a minute. The other option is if you are using the small group quoting, when the final step that hopefully I have preached and preached and preached about is that when we complete the proposal, we meet with the client makes a final decision. The final step is that what we want to do is go into that market request, which was formerly the deal or RFP, and we're going to want to mark what was sold, right? So all that work we do when we build those proposals, if we go back into that market request and mark it as sold, it's going to pull up our proposals. We'll be able to select those policies that the client has decided to go with for the next year. It does all that work for us, right? And copies those policies back to our in-force policy area of the system. So we have now the ability to attach a lot of that really important information there as well. So two options. If I'm running proposals, I can go into my mark deal as sold or mark quote as sold, push the buttons like I normally do, and it's going to copy and create those new policies. Or I can go right into those existing policies and select that policy renewal button. Two different options. We'll go through that today. Hopefully we'll have time at the end because I want to make sure we also talk about some additional automations that we can turn on with the click of a button on the back end. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we have to go in and we need to renew each policy. Why do we do that? There's so many variables that change, right? Very rarely do our policies renew without any change. Maybe the rates change, maybe the carrier changes, maybe the plan design changes, right? Same carrier, plan design changes. So we need to do that with that policy renew button or the mark deal is sold. But the good news is with the automation, if we turn some of these on, then we don't have to also go in to the existing policies and expire them or terminate them. So we have automation that if you turn it on, and Ashlyn and team, we'll want to make sure that we go through that with you and decide, because you get to decide if you want to turn this on or off. But the benefit is that it moves those policies through the system, right? We don't have to also go into the policies and expire the old ones. The system will do that for us with some of this automation. And lastly, I do want to mention before we get into this that there also is kind of a catch-all pending terminated. So we had feedback with the initial automation process that everything was moving from in-force to termed, and some people were behind on renewing their policies. So we added a force status, which is pending termed. So if you haven't renewed it and you're supposed to, it'll kind of catch it before it moves into the terminated or archived. Last automations too, the potential with the Benelinx setup is also that we can turn on the ability that if you do lose a client, let's say gets purchased, right? That we can automatically overnight terminate all the policies related to that account, just keeps the system nice and clean. Lastly, we're going to continue the training, which is great. So next Tuesday, same place, same time, and we are going to review the new Get Quote feature. So excited about that. And again, the invite will go out right after this presentation. So let's take a look here. I'm going to move this off screen. I can use as my notes. All right, so again, we're going to go into my favorite test account, which is Bob's Bakery. Someday I might patent it. All right, so let's talk about policies. Again, you'll see the services look exactly the same. So we've mirrored the features, the fields, and the dynamic nature of those. So if I'm inside my client account, Bob's Bakery, I go over to my policies. So some of the updates that we're making is that because we're adding a pending status, you can see we're separating out the policies related to Bob's Bakery from pending. And what does pending mean is that they haven't started yet, right? So we don't want those to be commingled with our in-force. Then we've got our in-force, the current policies that are currently still in place, right? We haven't hit January 1 of 2025 yet, even though we're all thinking about well beyond probably at this point. Our pending, and then our terminated, which is our archived. Okay. So let's take a look at an example policy. So some of the fields you'll see here that may or may not be in your existing org. So again, when we go through some of the package updates that Ashlyn and team are going through, they're sending out requests. They're asking you whether or not you want to make the updates. You will need to give approval to us to make these updates, but then we can also go through kind of what you want turned on and what you don't want turned on, right? That includes field visibility as well. So some of the fields that you see here. So a couple things you'll notice that I want to review before we kind of dive into kind of the changes, right? So you'll see when you build a brand new policy, you're going to set the effective date. The effective date is the date the contract, right, with the carrier goes into place. It's first day of the month, typically. Every once in a while, we have a nuance, right, where it's kind of the 15th of the month. But in most cases, it's the first of the month. Other really important fields, just as a kind of a reminder of how our automation works, is we're going to have by default the contract length set for us. Most contracts are 1 year, but we may have situations where we have 2-year, we have off renewal, maybe we have a chamber plan, or even we can even set a custom, or maybe no expiration, right? But by default, the system sets 1 year, and we can set that and we can change it if we need to. 2-year, maybe like a life and DI, right? So we have that contract length set, and you'll see below that the policy expiration date is not something we can actually edit. It's because based on the contract length, the system will automatically calculate that expiration date for us. Okay. Expiration date's really important. Why is it? Because, again, this is when the contract expires, and we actually look at this field, not our effective date field, when we're looking at reporting and some of the automation with our renewal workflows. Why do we do that? Because if this is not a traditional annual contract, maybe it's a 15-month contract, if I'm looking at an effective date, right, it's not going to pull in correctly because the policy actually doesn't renew 12 months later. So we use this field quite a bit. It's important to know what it's doing and why. So by default, it's already going to set it at 1 year for you, but we can automatically adjust it. This will also determine, based on that automation I mentioned, that when this time passes in real time, if we turn on that automation, then it will automatically update our status field for us. Okay, it's going to move it through the system from pending to enforced to terminated based on the information that we fill in here. Okay. Other thing that's really important with some of these updates, some of this we've already made like a year ago, some of this is newer to some of the orgs, is that we have enabled what Salesforce calls their lightning pages, their dynamic lightning pages actually. And what that means is that depending on fields at the top, we always put the most important fields at the top, or we try. We also make the most important fields required, and we can know that by the asterisks, right? So depending on the status, for example, then we're going to have different fields visible. See what happened there? If I set the status as terminated, guess what happened? There was a field below it. I'll go back to it. That was there, and now it's gone. So there's enforced type, which is a new field we'll talk about in a minute. But that's what dynamic means, is that depending on how I fill in the top required information, you'll see that some of the information changes. Okay. I've had people call service requests. They're like, something happened. You're not crazy. Okay. So it's doing that intentionally. And why do we do that? And why do we enable it? It's because it's important for us to be able to keep your pages as clean as possible. And this new feature with Salesforce allows us to do that, right? So we don't have to have that field kind of down on the page where we have to go find it, right? We can replace it depending on that status. It's really important to understand, and you'll see some other fields kind of come and go depending on maybe my rating method, right? So other fields that have probably already been updated, if I do that, now guess what? My composite premium disappears. If I change it back to my 4-tier, guess what? Now those fields appear. So understanding that these pages specifically heavily dynamic in nature is the policy fields, the policy records. Okay. Other things to be aware of and some of the changes. So when we're renewing policies, we need to track, right, some really important data points. When we renew a policy, we need to know, is it a renewal policy? Is it being renewed? We also have the ability now to connect the old policy with the new policy. So we can see that history. Gee, this policy renewed. Well, where did it come from? What did we renew it off of, right? But we also need to track and make sure we understand the original effective date. So as we move through and we renew these policies, we need to know, when was this originally sold? Why is that important? It's really important for us to track and understand, right, the history of our policies, but also it's really important if we have a graded scale. If we're paying our producers, first year commission, you get a certain percentage, and then second year and beyond, you're renewing business, you get a different level of commission, right? We have to be able to track that, right? And so we've added some of these fields for us to keep track of it, and the system will build it for us. So most of, if not all, these fields are automatically going to be created for us. It's important to know. I'm a system admin in here, so technically most of you are not, and so you shouldn't even be able to edit these records or these fields, sorry. So it's visible, but shouldn't be editable. Why? Because if we renew policies correctly, right, one of two ways, either the renew clone policy button here, it'll actually do that work for us. And that was part of the reason why we built the button. We didn't want you to have to go in and update, 8 fields every time you renewed a policy. With the system does it for us. So that's part of that automation. Okay. Important to know what those fields are. Why do we have them? If you want them enabled, we can do that. Important for tracking, right, and reporting. So new fields here. Let's talk about the two most important new fields here at the top are going to be the enforce type. Again, why did we add these new fields to the policy? Because we needed more information, right? A lot of debate in and out. We've seen other systems. Do we add kind of a status to the enforce, or do we add a whole nother field? Whether you like it or not, you can blame me if you don't like it. But it made more sense to separate it out, right? We have a general status field, right? That is the 4 different categories we have now. We have enforced, pending, terminated, and pending term, right? So we've got a little bit more information there. Pending meaning hasn't started yet. Again, terminated means expired, term, generically, no longer active. And then pending is that catch-all. Okay, so we've added a little bit more information there, but when a policy is enforced, we wanted to know more, right? And our clients wanted to know more, right? Is it a brand new policy? And what does that mean? A new policy means a brand new product we've sold. Okay, otherwise we're renewing for all the other reasons. So the only time we're going to use the enforce type is new. The only time we're actually not going to use the renew clone policy button is if it's a brand new product that we've sold. They didn't have vision, they're adding vision this year. That's when I'm going to set this type as new, and I'm not going to use the renew clone policy button. I'm just going to create a brand new policy. Any other time, we're going to pick from the other 3 options, right? Because it is renewing. That vision, let's say dental, give a different example, is renewing, right? And so renewing what? Renewed with no change. Great. Didn't have any change at all. Same carrier, same plan, same rate. Happens with ancillary more than medical. Maybe it renewed with the same carrier, but changes. What does that mean? Changes meaning maybe they got a 5% increase. That's a rate change, right? Same carrier, but a rate change. Maybe the client decided, same carrier, Delta Dental, but they want to change the plan design, right? That's when we would use this particular value. And then the last one is a complete replacement, right? Again, they had dental before. We've moved them now from Delta Dental to Guardian, right? Still dental, and they're still renewing, but they're renewing with a different carrier and or then obviously different product and rates. So this gives us more information again. Why is this valuable? Because now, again, not only tracking kind of the history of our policies, but the reasoning. We can now do analytics and reporting to say, what is our movement, right? At the end of the year, when we have this massive movement of our policies, are they staying put, right? Are they changing because of rate increases, right? Does that mean same carrier changes, or are we shifting them to a brand new carrier where then we can report on that and we can have those conversations with the different carriers on what's happening with our block of business. Really important for us to track that next level. In addition, when we go to a terminated status, then we can set why, because everybody wants to know why, right? When we're terminating a policy, not a client, a policy, why is this terminating? Is it terminating because it's non-renewed? They're done. Carrier's not selling that product anymore, or that plan expired, or the client terminated. So we can get granular too with the terminated status and give us the reasons why. A little more information than just it's no longer in force. Okay. Really important then for us to track that. Really helpful for us to kind of get that next level again of information about what's going on with our agency and the movement of our policies with our clients. Hopefully that was helpful to kind of dive into kind of what's new, where it lives, how does these policies get created, and why do we have this new information? Okay. So let's renew a policy. So when I'm going in and I go into renew a policy again, if I'm setting up the structure correctly and I'm doing it right, right, we're going to go in and we've got these are the policies that are going to expire soon, right? They're going to be terminated at some point. The expiration date that's not visible here is automatically set for 12/31. Right, so we're in the middle of renewing our January business. We're all aware. Yep, this is what clients are making decisions on. So we're going to go into one of those enforced policies. And again, if it's not a brand new product we're selling, only time we won't use the renew policy button. And look at what happens, right? So what it does, it pulls up all this information, right? It's going to build the policy for us as much as possible, right? It's really important. As much as we can do, we are. And I still really believe that there should be a touch point with all of our policies every year, right? Because we need to make sure we're updating our system. So, but what we did is we did as much as we could for you. So you can see behind me, right? This policy is set to expire. And it's, for 1/1/2024, it's going to expire 12/31. So it automatically, moves the dial for us. So it says, okay, well, then we're going to assume that this new policy that's being created is set for 1/1/2025. The effective date, I can set my contract length. It's copying all that for us. We don't have to fill this in. It did it for us. Okay. A couple things about that real quick. So just because it does it for us doesn't mean we can't change it. If there's some nuance here, I actually have the ability, even though it copies it, to update and change it if I need to. It's copying the history from the old policy though. Where we start to want to make some adjustments though is to tell the system what type of renewal it is. Okay. My developer is removing new as we speak. Should not be there because we're renewing policies. So that'll be gone soon. So what we're going to do is we're going to decide between the 3 renewal options. What type of policy is this? What are we renewing it off of? Is it no change? Same carrier with changes, right? And that would be either rates or plan design, or a total replacement, right? Moving carriers. So we're going to make that selection. We have the ability to change our plan design if they changed, right? Totally different carrier. I'm going to replace this with a different carrier's plan. I also have the option to change the carrier name. These 2 fields, again, I had mentioned earlier, these fields may or may not be used. Why would I want to put this information in, right? If I want to track expected revenue against realized or actual revenue, we have to tell the system what we're expecting. Expecting in the form of monthly premium. Again, snapshot in time. We're getting as close as we can to, get actual data. Carriers give us a snapshot. Your clients add and remove, employees from their plan. So it's a snapshot, right? But it gives us better than nothing, gives us something better than nothing. So we can put that total monthly premium in, an estimate. We can put our expected members too, right? So what that does is then we can compare what we're receiving in commission, right? So if we have a PPM, expected members is helpful. We can compare that. If we have a percentage of premium, now we can compare what we're expecting, right? We're expecting 5% of our premium. So those use cases is why we have those fields available. So we're going to be able to then finish. And what it did is now it opened up the record we just created. It not only created the policy for us, it set the status correctly. It's pending because that hasn't started yet. And you look what it did. All those fields I said you don't have to update, it did for us. It linked the old plan to the new plan. It moved the original effective date down, right? So it's doing that work for us so we can track the history of our policy. So it does as much as it possibly can for us, which is a lot. That tracking and that connectivity is really important. Okay. So we're going to use the renew clone policy. We have to go into an existing policy. That's when we'll be able to see that renew clone policy button. We select it, we make adjustments, we hit save. Only time we're not going to use that button is if we have a brand new policy, product, right? What does that mean? They didn't have voluntary life. We've added it. So that's when we're going to use the new button. And then we're going to go in and fill in, select our vol life, fill in all the required fields, hit save. So we're transitioning what we taught you initially for some of our older clients, right? We used to tell you go in and build a new one each time, right? Now, only time we're going to do that is if it is a new product sold. Otherwise, we're going to use the renew policy button. Okay, let's pivot over then to the mark deal is sold or the mark quote is sold. It's going to take me a little bit to remember all of our new naming conventions. So if I pivot over, let's say I quoted this group in our small group quoting, right? I created that market request. I already uploaded the census, created a bunch of proposals, right? So as we've trained on, and we'll review next week, is we're going to always go back to our market request record, right? This is where we're tracking the process. This is where we get our quote, but this is also where we have our mark quote as sold. So if I generated that proposal, client made a decision off of what I recommended, then the same process that we go through, we're going to go in, find the proposal, if there was a contribution strategy, but now we're going to select what the client bought, right? Just like we did before, we're going to select the policies depending on the products. And then a couple added fields here. We're going to say, is this a new or renewing, right? Is there no change? We're also then going to attach the old policy to the new one. It's going to give us just the dental options that are in force, right? So we are going to have to self-select that because we need to tell the system, yeah, this is renewal, no change, before we hit save. Same process then applies. Once I hit save, it creates that record for us, but it's attaching it just like I would when I'm looking at and using that renew policy button. So subtle changes there, but definitely similar as far as what we're going to track and how we're going to manage that. You can see here, right? Creating that new record, and we can accomplish it either by the renew policy button or that mark quote as sold. Okay. I'm going to pause for a second. Any general questions before we go into kind of the automations, the additional automations behind the scenes? As far as how do when do we use the renew policy button or service renewal button?
Rachel, we do have one.
Okay.
For age banded rates,
Mhm.
would they use renew policy? Would they need to quote? How do they handle those?
So same process. If you're using the quoting, right? If you're using our quoting engine and you use the new generated proposal, when you go back into that, as I recommended, and I just closed that, so I'm going to go open it again. Yeah, you're still going to go back to your market request. You're still going to go in and mark quote is sold. And when that creates that new policy, it will copy over those table rates for you. Same process that was before. If you use the renew policy button, then it's not going to copy over any rates. So it's a really good point. I forgot to mention that. So let's go back. So If I use the mark quote as sold, rates will go with the new policy. It'll be age banded, but also the composite rate. So whatever was in that proposal, rate-wise, will copy into the new policy. The opposite of that is if I use the renew policy button, it will not copy any of the rates because those are assumed that they need to be updated. Okay, so table rates are going to be missing. You have to go in and manually load those just like you would if you didn't have or you're not using the quoting. Okay. Any other questions? I'm going to
That's it
reiterate
for
that
now.
so that I'm clear for everybody. So we're all 100% clear. So when I use the renew clone policy button, okay, regardless of what type of policy it is, you have to manually update once it copies everything over the rates. It's going to copy those over if it's composite. You'll have to build the table rates if it's age banded. So the renew button does not adjust the rates. Okay, maybe future release, maybe not. There's some complexities there, right? If I go into the market request and I'm using my proposal tool, right? I go in and mark it as sold, it will copy over those rates for you because those are already captured. When we get our quote, the proposal has both the tiered rates and the age banded, so it will copy that over for you. Great question. Any other questions? Okay.
That's it for now.
All right. So let's show you the services. We have a little bit extra time before we jump into the automation. Same process, right? We have it organized. We're splitting these out for those people that have an older design, right? You'll see that we split out now policies from services because we want it organized exactly the same way. For those that want to renew their services every year, they may want to renew their Cobra, etc. You're going to go through the same exact process. Again, you'll see the design and layout should be matching. What we have inside the policies, we should have the same design for you here. You'll see also the dynamic nature and the options for you to renew. Okay, we can set our contract length. If we're not renewing policies, we can set it to, no expiration date. So this is for those folks that really do want to touch those services and renew them every year so that they're making sure they check that off their list, right? We've discussed with the client, we're going to be continuing to support their COBRA administration, etc. Okay. Same feature then, we're going to go into the renew clone services and you'll see exactly the same, right? We have the options of adding in information, setting our contract length, changing what the type is, updating if it's again, we're still providing the service, but we've got a different partner and that's the equivalent of a carrier. We can adjust that as well. And confirming, again, we'll update that policy. Create a new one, carries all the information over from the prior. So conceptually, same process, different object, right? We have policies separated from our services. And now nicely organized so we can see, what's pending that's going to take over, what is currently in force, and then our archived. So, as I mentioned, that's going to be the manual process. Every policy has to be touched. If you're renewing your services, you're going to need to go in and renew the services as well. Okay. So that is going to be that manual process of updating those records, creating new ones, either by the new button or the renew policy. But where the automation can be really helpful for us is on the back end, we can turn on some of the Benelinx automation with a click of a button. And what we can do is help with not having to go through all these policies at the beginning of the year and move them from pending to in force, right? Or from in force to terminated. That's a lot of manual updating. So once we renew the new policies, they automatically go into a pending status. Then we're done. We have to go into each policy and do it. But then if we turn on the automation, we don't have to go into the old policies and do anything with them. The system will do it for us. And what the system will do is that, again, when time passes, 12/31 passes in time when we're into, into January of 2025, overnight, the status will update and it'll move the pending into enforce, right? Because those are now active enforce policies. It'll move the enforce status, it'll update this field, and it'll move them down either into the pending termination or our terminated policies archive. Really helpful when we look at the volume of work, right? We have to touch all of these and renew them. Once they're renewed and set up in the pending, then we can let the system update that massive amount of updating of all those records that we're going to be moving through the system to archive, and we don't have to touch them. The system will do it automatically based on those expiration dates. Okay. Other important thing, I get this all the time from folks, is like, oh my gosh, what if it's wrong? And what if I made a mistake or I need to update, right? Nothing in Benelinx is undoable at this point. So we simply can go in and edit the record, right? If something happens and we need to move it, the client last minute decided not to cancel the policy. We can simply go in and just update the status. So we have the ability always, even in our archive terminated policies, to go in and make adjustments if we need to. So nothing is locked down where we can't make those manual entries if something happens. And as I know, fully aware, in our industry, last minute changes are made, right? People make decisions, they change, they rescind, they update, they move things around. So we can always go in and reverse what the system does. Okay. We can always go in and make any updates to that, and then save it. And all it's doing on that related list to our policies, if I go back to Bob's Bakery, it's just organizing it for us, right? It's just organizing based on a filter that says these are policies that are pending, these are policies that are in force, and these are policies that are termed. Okay, that's all it's doing. So if I update the status from term to enforce, all it's doing is moving that existing record from one bucket to another, right? Visually, we're just making it nice and organized for you. Okay. So important to know what can be done can always be undone. But what we're trying to do is create automation. So you don't have to not only renew the policies, but go in and expire the old ones, right? That's a big step, right? We're taking half of the process off your plate. Okay. Other automation, as I mentioned, again, real simple. We literally click buttons on the back end. Is if you want us, if a policy or a client, sorry, is lost, right? They got bought, they go to business, God forbid, any of those other variables. And so again, if we turn that on, then nightly, most of these syncs happen nightly. They don't happen instantaneously. The system is going to circulate through, find any of the accounts that are set at the type of, whether it be terminated or lost. We have various clients having, various definitions. If it's set for that termed status, then nightly, what it'll do, it'll go through and it'll expire my policies and services for me. It'll also actually set all my contacts as inactive. Just a great way to clean up the system, right? So if I pull a report and I want to see all my enforced policies, those clients that have left or terminated, those policies won't stay in the enforced status. So big picture automation, right? From the account level, if clients, terminate, through then the automation that we can set for our policies. That's it. Hopefully it was a good overview. A lot of changes there, a lot of automation, which hopefully is helpful, and a lot of potential for reporting, right? At the end of the day, we use agency management systems to organize our lives, right? Help with us with some of the automation. But as a former agency owner, we really need to understand what's happening with our business. The analytics are really important. Keeping the information in our system up to date and current, we're relying on our employees to do that. And then for us to be able to pull dashboards and reports and see what's going on, do those comparisons, start to understand when we're moving or, our policies are shifting, where are they going? Why are they making changes, right? Are they moving carriers? Are they just renewing as is? Some people are holding tight, right? Depending on the market you're in. Some are making dramatic shifts to their decisions. we also need to be able to accommodate the complexities of commissions, right? Graded commissions, tracking. What year are we in, right? So we can correctly and adequately pay our producers based on those more complex commission schedules. And lastly, I just want to remind folks that Ashlyn will probably remind me if I don't, that we are getting better at when we make updates to your particular Benelinx or Salesforce org that we're asking you for permission. Can we go in and make these updates, right? Can we go in and which of these updates do you want to make? So that they're reaching out, they already have been, asking for access, but also permission, right? And what part of this do you want? Do you want all of it? Do you want some of it? Do you want us to remove some fields? Do you want to add some fields, right? We're giving you the power of making those decisions on deciding kind of the level of changes that you want to make with some of our new features with Benelinx. All right, that's all right. Any other questions that came in?
Yes, Rachel, if you have the terminating client policy automation on, what happens to the commission checkbox?
It will stay on because there is always that lag time, right? We're constantly working on that commission checkbox and the automation with that, but it will stay on as a default, simply because we're always paying commission in arrears. Something that is new that's coming is that we're going to have a schedule for each client to be able to decide if they want automation to turn those off and when. So it'll stay on unless you manually update it and turn it off, so that you don't miss those policies and being able to pay out to your producers for policies that you receive commission on for prior months. Good question. We've been challenged with trying to figure out how to create automation around turning that off. And we're gonna, in our Benelinx setup, we're gonna give clients, we've decided, you decide when would you like the automation? Would you like it at all? If you want the automation to turn off, uncheck that box. When do you want it? 3 months, 6 months, 9 months? You can decide, and then knowing it'll kind of again clean up the system for you at a delayed time that you feel appropriate. And it's going to be dependent on the client, so we're going to let you decide. We tried to decide for you. We couldn't. We're like, this is too variable. So we're going to let you decide when you want the system to kind of circulate those old policies and turn that commission posted box off. So
We have another one. What about the handout box, checkbox?
By
If
default,
if they're having issues with having to manually do it for 2025 right now,
shouldn't. So when you renew a policy, that box should automatically be checked. And yeah, so by default, when I create a new policy, if not, you'll need to let us know. But a new policy being created should automatically have that, sorry. That box checked. You can manually uncheck it if you don't want that policy in the handout. There's 2 variables that filter. Where are we at? Down here somewhere? Yeah, by default when it creates new. But the secondary, so it's looking for that. So when we create a booklet, right, it's looking for this to know, should I include this policy in the handout or not? But it's also looking at a secondary field, which is our status. So we've updated a lot of orgs with that, what we call queries of what the system, the booklet generator is looking for. And it should be looking for, we have to decide, enforce or pending, and it's looking for pending. So it's the checkbox and the status. And we should be updating those so they're not looking at enforce anymore, but they're looking at pending, because most people are building those booklets well before the policies start, right? We're renewing January business now, so we want it to look to the pending status. So if that hasn't been updated in your org yet, please reach out and we'll go through and make sure we update that. But it's looking at both. And if for some odd reason you're renewing policies and that box is not checked, reach out, we'll take a look, but it should be by default having that box checked. Good questions.
Another one is about when the new quoting system will go live.
Live in some orgs now. And we're kind of rolling it out kind of depending on requests, but also some of the variables on the requirements. So we'll discuss this more next week, but one of the reasons why we redid and revamped our Get Quote is that United Healthcare, starting January quoting, January 1, 2025, requires NPN validation for their agency partners. And so us kind of taking a broad stroke at looking at the clients that have a lot of business with United, we kind of rolled those out first. We're phasing it in. We're still working through a couple bugs, but we're, daily, weekly making improvements. And so we do have some clients live already. If you would like to be added to the list and us to go through some, personal training with you to get that set up, we're happy to do that. So we've kind of been rolling out in phases, but definitely we have some clients that are already using it full time. A massive change. So there's a few things we're still working out, but it's a good improvement. Hopefully, when we show you that next week, you'll be pleasantly surprised with a lot of the feedback that we got from our clients again, with some of the adjustments we've made and enhancements.